everyone, Bentley here. So we're back with Dan from Aquarium Insider and Consolidated Fish Farms, and this is all about you. I put out a community post asking for a whole ton of questions that you want to know directly from a fish farmer. We're going to walk through a lot of those questions. Honestly, Dan gave me a lot of his time, answered a ton of questions, so big thanks to Dan. Again, just a reminder, we had some minor internet hiccups, so you might see some audio sync issues that happen on Dan's side compared to the video. That's just a matter of some minor stuff. We were having some internet issues. I tried to edit as much of that to the best I could to make it clean and not have like big gaps and stuff like that. But just be aware that that's going to happen. Unfortunate, but you know what? It doesn't stop the audio from being good. So throw this one on the background, do some water changes, and let's enjoy. So we're back with part 2 with Dan. Consolidated Fish Farms, Aquarium Insider, friend, awesome person, all those good titles I think apply.
Oh, I appreciate that.
We're going to do a question and answer session. I asked my community a simple, if you had an opportunity to ask one question to a fish farmer, what would you want to know? And I have a small horde of questions available, and we'll pick through some of these. And I'm curious, some of them I might have to go, I didn't know if this is true or not. But let's see here. I think we talked about this briefly on the side, but I'll ask this first. From Will C., what factors do you use when choosing what fish to focus on producing?
Sure. So we use a bunch of different ones. So I'll list them kind of how I look at it in my head. The first thing is what we would call fecundity. Basically, for us, is how many babies can this fish have at one time. And then the second thing we'll look at is, well, how hard is it to raise those babies, essentially? Are they super small like rainbow fish? Are they going to lay eggs like angels? Like, how do they basically spawn, and are we able to raise them from babies to basically fry? And then the third thing we'll look at is how long it takes us to reach the first marketable size. And the main reason we do that is because if you look at it, most of the fish sold in stores are not very big. They're always that. Generally, the main reason is those larger fish aren't profitable for farms to keep raising because it takes so long to get them bigger at all. And I'll give you an example. Pretty much any large South American fish, they are not worth the money that the farms have to sell them at in order to sell them in the stores. It takes too much money and costly space where they could have raised 2 to 3 times as many fish in the same spot and got way more money for the fish itself. And then the last thing we'll look at is price action of the fish. What does that fish typically command as a price? What can I get from a farm level? What can I get for it locally? And are there other farms producing the same fish? For what we do, we picked fish that weren't being done locally, that we had a lot of knowledge in, and that we could do successfully, and that we had options to both sell local and in distribution. So we do have a few people we sell locally to that do some other boutique distribution like us, and then we also distribute those same fish. So angels aren't big for us. We have a lot of knowledge in that area. We know how to do it, and it's very systematized down to the percentage of survival of eggs, to how many times a month they will spawn. We have all that in logs and paperwork, so we can really calculate what we're making or not making on the animal.
So basically, you're never going to do zebra plecos.
I'm never doing zebra plecos. I will say I'm kind of interested, if this gets bigger, that I want to build my own personal fish room of really hard to do species and do those as giveaways on the channel. And my number one fish to ever do would always be a zebra pleco, but I want to do it personally, just give them away.
Yeah,
I think that'd be super cool.
Well, I'd be in like every giveaway known to man if that was the case. All right, so I think let's kind of piggyback a little bit. But how do you determine the stocking levels of fish in your breeding facility? That comes from Bob Purcell.
Stocking level based on what was the last part of it?
Just in your breeding facility. So is there,
okay.
Maybe this only applies to like the stuff you're not breeding, but maybe it does apply to breeding as far as like, how do you determine, say, stocking level in a pond or something like that?
Okay. Generally, it'll depend on what size we're growing the fish to a lot of times. So that first markable size could determine how many fish we stock it to. So I'll give you an example. We will probably stock in a pond, if we were doing pond raised angels, we'll put anywhere between 10 and 15,000 angels in a pond. Now, we'll put more angels in a fish pond if we're only going to be probably getting them out, let's say at what we call quarter body size, meaning we can put more bio load or biomass in that pond than we could if we did something that we wanted to get a little bit bigger. Like we do have certain areas where we will grow fish up to a larger size because we know the time frame isn't that much more extended, but we want to make sure we give the animal ample room to grow. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So angelfish are a good one. We'll do gold dust, maybe 12 to 15,000 probably a pond. I'd say most of the fish we stock are probably between 10 and 15,000 fish per pond.
Okay.
And that's as a baby up until what we consider their first market for size.
I think this is interesting because some of us hobbyists treat this like it's just magic, but how do you feel about green water and algae in your breeding tanks versus, say, out in a pond?
I think it's good. And I don't have a scientific paper to back this, but I can tell you right now, fish that are exposed to green water or ponds of some kind, more that live food option out there, they do better, and they just have brighter colors than fish that are done indoors in either a flow through or research system that don't have that same exposure.
Okay.
I don't have the reason as to why. I can just tell you I could grow it probably twice as fast, and that could just be due to actual area they can be in, right? But I would say that's a good thing. I don't think that's going to hurt the fish by any means. I mean, if you look at pond water for ponds down here, all of them are brown. It's just like river water. I mean, that's what they're grown in. So people think everything's got to be super pristine. It's not pristine in these ponds they come from.
And yet they're doing just fine.
And they do great. And they come out, I will say, I think healthier. Like their stronger immunity seems to be up there.
Okay.
Again, no scientific paper to back it, just something we've seen over the last 20 years.
So this is that first question was from Ginger Frost. This is a second question also from Ginger Frost, but I feel like it kind of ties into something we talked about in your interview, but maybe we can hone in a little bit. And that's, what is your longest running fish colony on the farm?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd say right now it's more than likely going to be Livingstone African cichlids.
Okay.
Well, truthfully, if you really want to know, it's probably green sailfin mollies if you really want to know. That fish has been on our farm, I guarantee you, for over 50 years.
Oh, wow.
It was here when we bought the farm, and it's been here ever since. We don't breed them specifically. They are just literally here. And we have them in all sorts of shades and types and colors and huge things. That's probably the longest thing on the farm we have. And we're not breeding specifically. They're just kind of in and around all the ponds. And we trap fish, and we'll have some in the traps, and I'll pull some out and sell. They're so mean. They are so aggressive. They're just I don't like them for community tanks. Like, they are not nice.
But as far as something you're intentionally cultivating,
potentially growing, it'd probably be the Livingstone giraffe cichlids. That's probably our largest running colony in the ponds and stuff, because we were pond spawning a lot of those for a long time. Not as much anymore, but we still have some of those. And I believe they're probably 7 years old, 8 years old. Which we rotate out angel breeders every 2 years. 2 to 3 years.
So that, I was going to say, that's great context. How often do you rotate breeders of some of your more prolific fish?
Yeah, so angels is a big one for us. We don't get rid of them. Well, we get rid of them every 2 to 3 years, but we rotate them in and out of our buildings every 4 months. So we have roughly around 250 pairs of angels. And then we have another set of large angels that will pair up that basically is 500 in our grow-out facility. And every 4 months, we'll take those ones that are outside, and we'll rotate them inside, and we'll rotate pairs at a time per week. So it's basically not put so much strain on the same fish producing babies so often, like once a month.
Yeah, I think this is it kind of ties into that personal fish room, but from Paul Saltero, what is the hardest fish for you to keep and breed?
Well, right now I will tell you the hardest thing we've had to deal with is really high-end fancy angels. So the way, and this is how it's gone for most things we breed, the more specialized an animal is, like stuff that's not found from its basic common type, the more issues you have with breeding it. Whether that's either, I don't care if you want to call it line breeding or how you're going to inverse to inbreeding a few to get the traits you want out of it. When I'm talking like platinum angels, we've been working on a half black blue angel for dang near 3 years. And the amount of culls we have to go through, and culls meaning these are fish that born with super defects because the line wasn't kept clean enough, or we didn't outcross them, meaning we bred them with something else to make the line stronger in a generation earlier, right? They have so many genetic issues. It just was difficult. And then they were weak. So, and I think the bigger thing probably on all of that is they don't have as many young. The young production is the more you try to breed them in. And I say in relative, it's not inbreeding specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is to get a certain trait to a certain point. But once you get to a certain point, your production gets so low, it almost makes the fish not viable. And that's kind of how Blue Angels for us is kind of on that borderline limit, where like they're throwing enough young and the cull rates are not, we don't have that many as we used to anymore, thank God. But the amount of babies they throw in general are so low, it's probably going to be a fish we only offer occasionally in wholesale and mostly just in retail production capacity, compared to, let's say, like a more common angel like a gold or a silver, where it's just like freaking they are throwing babies once a month, almost 200 to 400 at a time. Like they're throwing some young and they don't have any issues. But the further you get into any fish, we've always found that to be the issue. So it's always really having good genetic lines and how you're going to handle the line. If you're doing line breeding, how you're going to handle line breeding. And just making sure you keep good records of that, because when you do it at scale, it becomes even more important. Because a couple mistakes or doing the wrong thing is going to cost you 9 to 12 months of your time.
Wow. Well, I think this is a great follow-up from Alyssa Bentley. Does a fish farmer also work on developing varieties of fish, like, say, a blue guppy or a red shrimp? Or do you focus purely on mass production?
Purely mass. Well, I'd say most farms probably do the mass production because that's where their sales are. They have to fill, so many of one fish per week. They've got to make sure they have those in production. For stuff like what we're trying to do, we want to be able to do a little bit different and go off the wall and experiment some. Bring in some fish that's never been bred before. Bring in some new fish that are not done commercially, and see how that works for us and if it's a good fish for us to breed, and hopefully bring in enough sales either in our distribution channel or our retail channel that makes it good enough we can keep producing it. And I will say we haven't been as successful, but I do have the ambition to work on some care species and bring care species to scale. Because that's one thing that's a big deal for me. Going to fish that are basically extinct, bringing them back into full-scale production, so at least the hobby has them, if nothing else. I think that would be super cool. And I will say, the lab down here I mentioned in our interview is worked on the Haplochromis picciatus. It's a Victorian hap. It's a solid black cichlid. Beautiful. We are working with that species now, along with I think 4 or 5 other farms, to really put the fish back out into the hobby so it's available at that level. And I really find that to be the most interesting side right now, as far as like what we could do, and making that sort of more known. But that can be challenging depending on what species you pick. Obviously, if the production level is low, it makes it very hard.
Awesome. From Console, in your opinion, which states are the most conducive, both geographically and politically, for starting a fish-related business?
Florida, 100%. I don't think you're going to find a better state than that. And generally, it's because of climate. It's relatively tropical here. We have in Florida I-4, which is basically the dividing interstate in the state. And basically, most of your fish farms you will find will be below I-4. And that's basically, forever, it's always been known to us as the freeze line. If you were below I-4 in the state of Florida, you were never going to really have any super hard freezes. So you weren't likely to lose a bunch of fish. So if I was to pick someplace to go, I don't think I'd move, or I'd move further south. Other states, now that's for tropical fish. If you wanted to do koi and goldfish, the world kind of is there. They do koi, a lot of koi in California. They do a lot of koi in Pennsylvania up north. They do a lot of bait fish, like I say bait fish. They do like feeder goldfish in Arkansas. There's other states. Texas does, I think, now some production. The hard part with doing tropical fish production in anywhere that's not Florida is going to be your cost for fuel to keep it hot enough. Just to keep the buildings hot enough that the fish don't freeze to death is going to be at scale massive. I mean, you're probably looking at a $10,000 propane bill a month minimum. And then how is that going to make sense in your production level? Like, do you even have enough facilities to make that work? Now, if you're doing something small scale to sell in retail, I think you could probably do it generally almost anywhere. You just have to make sure whatever your cost of really your heat, your cold months of the year, what that propane bill might look like, and then see, does my facility match how many fish I'm putting out that I could actually make this be a viable business. But I would say generally it doesn't work a lot of other places.
Okay. I want to, because we've talked about this a little bit recently, and I want to go back onto it from cheese balls. Negative effects of inbreeding, and if you are doing anything specifically to prevent it. You kind of lightly touched on that, but let's dig in on it a little.
Yeah, so inbreeding is part of the hobby, right? So inbreeding is a thing. It's been around. A lot of time inbreeding was used to they would get a group of fish that came off, whatever they were breeding, and the traits were close in the babies, right? And you can inbreed. You can inbreed them back real quick, and you can get a better throw of that specific thing that they were looking for, generally. And that's how it'll kind of start. Now, if you start doing only inbreeding down that line, the further you go in, the more issues you will 100% have. And that's why a lot of people like line breeding, where you're going to have a lot of the type of fish you want to do, but you're going to have separate lines. And then those different lines where you can kind of cross them back over time. And I would say that's probably at least I think we do it, if I'm not mistaken, I got to ask, I have to because I'm doing it now, but it'll probably every 2 to 3 generations. So we'll try to find the specific look, long fin, whatever it is. We'll try to breed back to that. We might cross them back as an inbreed once or twice, and then it's out crossed. It's brought back to something else. And that's to help keep the line as clean as possible. I say clean. I say make the fish as healthy as possible. That's probably a better explanation.
Yeah, just preventing detrimental defects, right?
Yeah. I haven't had a lot of success breeding straight back to wilds. So we've contemplated taking lines and bringing in wild angels, like wild scaleras, and crossing them back and see if we get a percentage of throw to that color and see if that strengthens their line. I haven't had much success in doing that. And I don't know why. It's just I can't get them to throw that way. Maybe it's just I focus more on manipulating the environment a little bit more, see if it works. But that's something we are considering doing as well. But we'll typically outcross it with somebody else's from a different perspective or a different line, or we'll trade back and forth here and there. But yeah, I don't like to inbreed more than maybe I'd say 3 generations. It just depends on a lot of times it'll depend on the fish. For something that's very specific, like angels, which are known to be more fragile sometimes, I think it matters. I think for some things that are a little bit more common, it might not matter as much. I wouldn't want to do it like 6 or 7 generations in, but but generally I don't know if it matters as much. Especially back in the day, I mean, pond production used to be a lot different back in the day. Back in the day, they just take breeders, toss them in the pond, and boom, I just let them breed in the pond and see what happens. And let them breed naturally. You can go with the smallies, you toss them in the pond, let them breed. We know in 9 months or 6 months we'd have X amount of babies in the pond. We could keep harvesting them. We just keep letting them spawn. Well, eventually that's not going to be the best method for getting the best lines of fish. So that's had to change over the years as well.
Okay. I think this kind of goes talking about ponds from Tommy O. How do you deal with birds? And we could kind of, I guess, expand that to like other potential predators.
Yeah, we have that issue now. So a lot of the farms will eventually keep birds out of the pond. So on top of these holes in the ground, they've got these big galvanized, what looks like trusses, like rounded trusses. They're basically just hoops, like greenhouse hoops, essentially is what they are.
Okay.
And they will take bird netting and put them on the outside. The other option a lot of farmers do is we have what's called bird bombs. Bird bombs is essentially a blank shotgun shell. And in the country, it works out pretty well because you just basically shoot it up in the air. It's a blank. It just makes a loud noise and scares the birds off. For us, that worked really well until we now are the only 7 in 3 subdivisions. So last time we did bird bombs, we had the cops call on us.
Oh,
We had like 7 cops in our driveway wondering what we were doing. I'm like, scaring birds off. Like, they came around the farm. I mean, they were all over the property when it was going on. I'm like, we have a right to farm act. We have permits. We can do any of this we want to. I didn't know it was affecting the neighbors. They could have just told us we were there having issues. But
yeah,
we've had to be more we've had to be more cautious on how we take care of predators. And like, we have other ones now. I have 2 alligators on the property. We'll have U.S. Fish and Wildlife come and trap those this upcoming week. We have otters on the property. Same thing. They'll come and trap them. We have frogs, turtles, stuff like that. There's not a whole lot we can do with. We'll try to limit them, and we don't eat them. I've had them before. They're not my favorite to eat. So I'm not.
So
But some farms might eat them.
no turtle soup for Dan. Got it.
No turtle soup. Can't eat it. Can't eat that stuff. It's not good.
From Lady Kedge, what do you feed for rapid growth?
What I feed for rapid growth?
Yes.
So high protein food is what it is our main food for growing things rapidly. But I think it's probably more important about how many times a day we feed. So we call it fattening fish up. And we are feeding fish, depending on the species, we'll feed fish twice a day. But in the morning, when we feed in the morning, we'll make 2 to 3 passes on the same system.
Okay.
Basically, like how most people feed. Hey, we feed everything they'll eat within 30 seconds to a minute. Generally most fish. We'll basically do something similar, but we'll just keep feeding them until they don't absorb the food. Like, till there's just a little bit left. We want to make sure we feed them as much as they can deal with in that time frame, and then we'll feed them at night. And these are for mostly fish in our grow out stage.
Okay.
Fish in their larval stage, where I'm still feeding them live foods like brine shrimp, we might feed them 3 to 4 times a day. Okay. And all that is for rapid growth. And we try to do as high protein as we can. Obviously, the younger they are, the higher the protein diet. The less, the older they are, the less protein we have to feed them. And I believe most of our early larval diets are really meal-like, and they're probably 50-60% meal. 50-60% protein roughly.
Okay.
Down to, I believe, 40% is our grow-out stage.
Very interesting. Doublecon fan, what parameters do you test daily, or if any?
We aren't testing any water for the most part unless we see an issue, and that's just because our water quality is typically so it's so standardized because it's just flow through. Mm-hmm. So I said in an interview, we have most of our stuff set on what we call flow through systems, which means water comes in and water comes out. We know the water's getting rotated so often that we're never going to have any water quality issues, even if we dumped a pound of food in the tank and we overstock that tank completely. We're generally not having issues. So for us, the only issue we might run into is on the way it works on the farm level. We obviously can't run city water because it's too expensive to pull permits from deep water wells. So we have 3 wells on our property that are 300, 400, 600 feet deep, and depending on how far the depth of the well is, will determine it'll determine saturation of other gases in the water, and then also the lack of present oxygen. So we have to build into our system design what we call degassing systems, which is basically, essentially it's just jetting down water in a big pool to cause big bubbles for aeration and agitation, which solves 2 things, right? It solves degassing of those things in the water we don't want, like CO2, nitrogen gas is dissolved in high concentrations can cause and hinder fish issues like growth and liver and kidney issues, to low oxygen, where if you put straight well water in a vat of our production vat, you've got about 20 minutes to figure that out, or they're all dead.
Wow.
So that's about the only real water quality things that matter, other than temperature. While we are monitoring it in the cold areas, when the nights get super cold, we'll turn on our propane heaters. And then we also have some emergency propane huge blowers, which basically run on what looks like a fire, like a grill, like a 5-pound propane tank. It's basically just hooked up to this humongous blower that we just stick in those greenhouses, and that's just to make sure the water doesn't drop below a certain temperature, right?
Okay.
We actually can keep our fish down to about 71 and not have many issues, even 70. And as long as we keep it above that level, we see virtually no issues in any loss or stress or disease issues.
Cool. From Shelby Ray Lane, what do you do with the cullfish in an operation at your size?
What do you do to cullfish?
Yeah, well, more like what do you do with those cullfish?
Oh, okay. Generally, it depends on at what level they are. So if they're fry and they don't have the bodies to deal with them, we have a pond that we would essentially feed them to. There's really nothing we can do with them. They have no production value, and they're likely to cause disease issues in our production tanks. So we don't have a place to put them there, but we're not just going to throw them on the ground. So we just put them in. And it's helped because our retail store too. We have what we call a surrender pond as well. So we keep one pond out of production that's purely fish, got bad advice, and they don't know what to do with the fish anymore. But generally, if we have no use for them, we will just take them and put them in the pond, and that's what we'll do with those as well.
Okay, so I think this is pretty interesting, kind of crossing the barrier, if you will. Also from a Nabokov fan, as a home hobbyist who wants to sell fish, what method would you do to make sure you're rotating breeding pairs and genetics?
If it was me and I was doing it at home, I would definitely be a part of my fish club, and I would work with my other people in the group that are breeding similar fish, and I would work on trading out my genetics with other people in that space. That would be probably the easiest and best way to deal with it, to make sure you're always getting good lines of fish. Fine hobbyists have some of the best fish in the country, from colorations and variations to size and health of fish, which I think is awesome. So for me, I would tap into that resource or a Facebook group that's in your area and work with people in your area that have those fish. Or if you can't find them, find somebody online that sells them and can work on getting you some different lines mixed in there. And that would be the best way to do it, in my opinion.
Okay. I think that's pretty good. We've had tons of answers, questions for an actual real-life fish farm.
Cool.
Dan, thank you so much for both part 1 and part 2, just getting your story, kind of understanding, what your life is and what you do. And then, of course, answering questions from my community. One more time, just to make sure, in case for some reason people haven't followed you where you are, let's go through all the places they can find you.
Sure. So you can follow. So I do have a YouTube channel, but I will say I created an Instagram, essentially. I will be posting sort of like my day-to-day, like what I do. And I will say I'll probably be doing mostly farm production here in the next few months. We're going to be scaling out our farm, and I'm going to be taking back over operations of farm production. So you're going to see really hands-on what I do on a day-to-day basis when I'm pulling fish. So you'll see that. You can find our store and how we sell fish retail on our website at consolidatedff.com.
Awesome. Dan, again, thank you so much. And hopefully at some event sometime soon, we get to sit down together in person.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having us. I have a blast, like always.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Take care.
There you go, gang. I really hope you enjoyed that. Dan was so great with his time, answering all your questions. Let me know in the comments down below. Did you learn something new? What did you find interesting? Should I do more of questions with a fish farmer? I don't know. Dan's a really awesome guy. He was willing to give me a lot of time, and we jokingly talked about doing maybe a more regular thing of talking together, but I want to hear your feedback down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, all the usual things. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. You get all sorts of interviews, product reviews, tips, tricks, random stuff, all sorts of fish-related content from some random crazy guy on the internet who happens to be very good at plants and likes a lot of rainbow fish. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.